how to just achieve a nice high gloss finish with almost any coating. The difference between using varnishings is we don't have different, we don't get offered different construction primers with varnish. We paint a wall, we put a primer coat on it. We paint, I don't know, jib board or something, we put primer on it if we're going to put emulsion on top. I'm suggesting that there is something that we can use with varnish, and it's just adding more thinner to the construction in order to get penetration down into the construction, the construction of the wood, the grain of the wood. Yep. Think of the grain at a microscopic level. If I go put cold varnish on top, where it's not preheated, at a microscopic level, this is the effect that I see. And over time, several hours, that might soak into some spots, it might not soak into all of the spots, right? If I use a very heavily thinned 20-30% terps or proper epithane do their own thinners, etc., etc., you'll get complete penetration down into all of these little grooves of what we're talking about. And we need to repeat that on a couple of occasions and a couple of coats until the paint stops drawing into the wood. Yeah, and it's usually a colour indication. So I'm looking at the wood and I'm seeing dry matte finishes as opposed to gloss, any sort of gloss starting to appear, even on these first couple of coats. Now then, here's the fun news. If you want a total mirror finish varnish out of single pack, you're going to be into 8, 10, 14 coats of varnish. 14 is like the given boat builder number of coats that I want to achieve to get that. We're talking cigar boat kind of beautiful Italian raw mahogany, you know, absolute mirror finish. And what we're doing is ourselves a massive favour. If we do, in the instance of doing any woodwork from raw, we've sanded it back 400 grit something or another, and it's all absolutely beautiful. We've got choices. We can oil, we can varnish. We've chosen to varnish. If I build up a massive layer on top of my grain tips, in a year's time or 2 years' time, when I have to recoat, I only have to knock down the top couple of layers and reapply the top couple of layers to achieve the same finish as what I've always had since new. This beautiful, beautiful finish, all right? So there's worth putting the work in the first instance. There's a guy in Nelson Marina who had a wooden topsides, varnished topsides, and everyone's, oh, you must have so much work. So not really, actually. Lightly hit it with some wet and dry once a year. One coat of varnish every year's the same. The first instance, he's put 20 coats of varnish on there in the first instance to get this top layer that I'm now not having to deal with any of the underlayers. Probably only in those 14 coats actually knocked back about 2 or 3 times. We need to talk about on the back of the tin of whatever product, single pack product that we're using, are going to be a couple of different cure times. We're going to have recoat time and then fully cured time at least. All right, we can reapply another coat on top of the coat at recoat time, and that's chemically easily just the chemical reactivation in that time period means that we don't have to provide any more mechanical bond. Right, we can't sand during that period. And in actual fact, once we start getting up above 3 or 4 coats, every coat that we put back on top of the layers of varnish are actually reactivating deeper. So the cure time goes up the more layers we put on. Does that make sense? Right, we do need to stop at reasonably regular intervals, 2 or 3 times during that build up of the microns of varnish, to knock back flat. So I'm taking off high spots. So this is a good quality orbital sander or a hand block, and actually blocking it back flat if you want to get the gloss finish. We blocked it back at, let's say, 3 coats, we blocked it back at 9 coats, we blocked it back at 12 coats. All right. the last couple of coats of whatever we decide to put on top, we want the last at least 2 coats to go on, or at least the very final coat to go on, no interference whatsoever. Right, how are we going to prep our surface? You guys heard of something called a tack cloth? Have a feel of that guy. Right, so I've cleaned the surface as best as humanly possible. Blowguns, vacuum cleaners, dusty brushes, whatever it takes. This is raw wood, this is varnish, pre-prep layer, anything to do, even if I'm painting, yeah? It's a sticky, I've no idea what the product is in there, but even if I've cleaned it to the best of my ability, I'm going to wipe over with a tack cloth and it's going to lift more crap out of there, more dust, all right? I'm not varnishing straight out of my pot. I'm varnishing out of, so I'm not varnishing out of my main tin of paint or varnish. I'm varnishing out of a cup, a clean cup, all right? And I'm pouring into the clean cup one of these guys, paper filter, all right? The idea is that I want to keep the tin of varnish or paint exceptionally clean. I don't want this thing open and me dipping a brush in and out and in and out and in and out all day long. I want to pour it into a cup and close the lid on that thing and keep it clean, all right? And I'm going to even clean it into my cup. If you want a gloss finish, it needs to be exceptionally clean. You're going to do things like wait for the weather to calm down, even if you're doing it in a garage or something or another, let alone in a marina on the deck of a boat. Wait for the weather to calm down. This is for the final job where we want an absolutely perfect finish, right? Brush, obviously very, very clean. We can talk about why I have got, for example, actually here, I've got a not very oval and a not very square brush to make my point. If this was very, very oval and this was very, very square, I'd be able to talk more easily to the idea that at the edges of my oval I'd have less bristles and more dense bristles, and I'd have an absolute cut-off of the same amount of bristles on my square brush. We're sold a varnishing brush as an oval brush for the idea that when I lay this guy down and push the brush down to pull the varnish out, the edges of that construction of the brush are going to have softer effects than the center of the brush in order to equalize. And that points at this idea, we're rolling the quantity on, the quantity of varnish with a sponge roller. The sponge roller is firm and it's able to pull the varnish out to a flat layer of even quantity across the surface of what I'm doing. And then I'm literally just knocking the bubbles out of and taking the very soft, the hard edges off of that sponge, where the sponge roller's interacted with itself across the surface, all right? And I've pulled that out gently with my varnish brush. If I've got a very large area that I'm varnishing, I'm not going to try to, if I can't reach, especially if I can't reach the whole area all at once, rather than try and do half of that area, try and do quarter or an eighth of that area at any one time, thereby constantly maintaining a wet edge around the quadrant of the bit that I'm talking about. If I do a whole big area and I pull it all the way out, by the time I've got all of that done, some of this is going to start to dry because I'm trying to use too big an area. I'm trying to apply to too big an area. By having a wet edge, a very wet edge, so we're not going to ever do this sort of thing in very strong sunlight, for example. By having a very wet edge, I'm going to be able to pull out across that wet edge and never end up with little dimples or ripples in between my areas of varnish. Murphy's Law says that I'm going to, the wind's going to come up. I'm going to get some imperfection in the surface, very best we can, and we've run out of paint. We're not going to go back to the shop to buy more of this expensive product. What can I do? I've got imperfections in the surface. Leave it for a couple of weeks until it is completely rock hard, and cut and polish. Freely think of cutting and polishing as something you can do to a new surface as well as an old surface to bring it back to life, or to get it up to a high gloss.